Do you feel like you're stuck or find yourself attracting the same type of relationships and negative experiences, or just not manifesting what you want in life? Welcome to Heal Your Story. I'm your host, Heidi. Here we discuss all things life, love, relationships, the relationship with yourself, and the stories we tell about ourselves and others. I help people get out of their busy heads and get back in touch with their heart space to learn self-love and help heal their story. I'm a heart space and relational coach, a holistic health practitioner, and author at HeidiDelaire.com and LoveWideOpen.com. Let's go hold some heart space together.
This episode is brought to you by the Weather Channel app. Did you know the app can help you forecast more than just the weather? With allergy tracking and flu risk mapping. So you know when to stay inside and load up on podcast. As well as air quality and UV indexing. So you know when to get outside, load up on sunscreen and podcast. Forecast more of what you love with the Weather Channel app.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. Episode 137, Power of Personal Boundaries. I really love the topic of boundaries. At one point in my life, I didn't have many. But now my boundaries are well defined and it has made my life so much easier. And now I teach boundaries and empowerment as a life coach. Many of the clients I have come to me with pretty poor boundaries. The empaths and sensitives, they really need boundaries. They're mostly giving themselves away to please others or feel that they have to please others in order to be loved. I think I've said this before in another podcast, but low self-esteem and poor boundaries go hand in hand. When we have a lack of self-love, lack of self-confidence, lack of, self-worth, we tend to just give ourselves away. We don't ever, tell anybody what we want because we're so worried about pleasing them that we will change who we are and do things we don't really want to do just to try to be loved or liked. So, personal boundaries. Personal boundaries are important for several reasons. They serve as barriers to protect your self-esteem. They are also tools for establishing limits with others and communicating that you won't tolerate certain behaviors. Those without personal boundaries commonly end up in less than ideal situations and relationships. Again, there is a correlation between poor boundaries, being an empath, and attracting toxic partners. So, without limits, you're a victim to the whims of those around you. Personal boundaries are about respecting yourself and demanding respect from others. Okay? Now, you can establish healthy personal boundaries with some of these following tips. I know this is going to be a little bit of a broad brush, but it's a start for you now if you're struggling with boundaries, and a place, like I said, a place to start, a place to investigate and get curious with yourself as why you keep giving yourself away. So the first way to establish healthy personal boundaries is learning to value yourself. You have the ability to set your own boundaries as you see fit. Few people will treat you better than you demand. So take responsibility for taking care of yourself. Unfortunately, no one else is going to take responsibility for your well-being but you. You're going to need to define yourself. Decide who you are, what you want to be, and how you deserve to be treated. What are you willing to accept from others? What are you no longer willing to accept? If you don't define yourself, the rest of the world will do it for you. And you won't like it. Years and years ago, when my boundaries were poor and I kept giving myself away, it did not make me feel good, right? I was allowing someone else to dictate how I moved through life. And when I finally decided to break free and learn what healthy boundaries were, did I realize that, okay, I can say no and it can be okay. And it is. It's okay to say no. As a matter of fact, it's healthy to say no. Place a priority on yourself. Others are important, absolutely, but they're not any more important than you. If you take care of yourself first, you're in a better position to take care of others. Running yourself ragged for others really isn't helping anyone. You'll be a better parent, a better spouse, an employee if you take good care of yourself. Consider where you need to set limits in your life. Maybe you need to put an end to volunteering, to work Saturdays, or to stop accepting emotional abuse from your boyfriend. Maybe you're just too willing to loan money to people that never pay you back. There's a difference between giving somebody something without expectation and giving something to somebody because you can't say no to them and knowing that they're never going to pay you back. There's a big difference in there. So you get in life what you're willing to tolerate. So what are you no longer willing to tolerate? Tell me, what are you no longer willing to tolerate? Make your boundaries firm and clear. Make your boundaries reasonable but clear to others. If others know where you stand on certain issues, there's less chance for confusion or miscommunication. It is also possible to have boundaries that are too strict, right? So what happens when our boundaries are far too strict is we don't let anything in, we don't let anything out. And that creates isolation. So there has to be a balance. If you're alone and overly self-sufficient, you're probably suffering from overly strict personal boundaries. So be a little bit flexible. You can be strong in your boundaries, but also flexible. It's that old adage, you can be soft and also strong. Yeah, so be flexible. You don't have to follow a rule 100% of the time. Decide who and what you want to let in and what's best to keep out. There's been many studies that have shown that people with some flexibility in their personal boundaries tend to have the best combination of happiness and success. Being too rigid can be just as problematic as being too lax. Finding a balance. That means when you're setting a boundary with someone and you're communicating about it, perhaps they ask you a question. You're like, oh, well, let's see. How do I really feel about that? And you can meld that boundary to work then for both of you. Here we go. Learn to say no when needed. Boundaries are limits on what you'll accept from others. Avoid falling victim to the tendency to make everyone else happy but yourself. Healthy boundaries and being a little selfish go hand in hand. It's not super selfish, but you have to take care of yourself here. Try saying no to someone today. The world won't come to an end. Okay, maybe we play a little game here. Maybe tomorrow, after you've listened to this podcast, how many times you actually then say no to something you don't want to do, and then report back to me. Shoot me an email. Okay? Start practicing saying no to the things you don't want to do. And communicate openly. When people cross your boundaries, it's up to you to inform them. You can't then go get mad or sad if they've crossed a boundary and they didn't even know what it was, first of all. But if they cross your boundary and they did know, you have to let them know, right? Like, it's the follow-up, because people will test you and they will test a boundary. And if you don't do anything about it, they just then say, well, that boundary doesn't mean anything to them. And I can cross it over and over and over and over again. And there'll be zero consequence for me. Communicating openly about your boundaries. And many times this is as simple as refusing a request. You may be required to provide more explanation in other circumstances, but others are unable to give you what you want if you don't provide feedback. So there's a lot of communication that's involved with setting clear and good boundaries. Having boundaries is an exercise in caring for and respecting yourself. You have the right to expect a certain level of respect and consideration from others. If your lack of personal boundaries is creating challenges for you, now is the time to start taking better care of yourself. Adequate boundaries are not only good for your self-esteem and general mental health, but for all other aspects of your life. You also put yourself in a better position to care for your friends and family. Trust me, good boundaries create a good and happy life. You know where you stand, and others know where you stand. So, what are you going to do to implement good boundaries in your life? If you need help, reach out. I'm sending you lots of love. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to another episode of Heal Your Story. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find me, my coaching services, my book, or book a Heal Your Story strategy session at HeidiDelaire.com. For other self-development articles, go to lovewideopen.com. And you can also follow me at Heidi Delaire or Love Wide Open on all social media channels. Thanks so much. Sending lots of love.